President. I am very much looking forward to concluding this debate. It's my favourite place to be in a debate. And I stand before you as the daughter of a very long line of soldiers and sailors who all fought and did service for this country. And I am in no way, shape or form saying, as the proposition seems to be under the illusion of, that we should not be funding the military. That is not what I think any of my colleagues and I are saying. We're just saying that it shouldn't always be the priority, that there are other things that we need to be focusing on in this country in order to have a country that is worth defending and that we want to defend. The first proposition gave you lovely merits of the military and very helpfully, thank you very much, proved all my points that the army is pretty good at achieving its job right now. It's going on, it's providing the threats, it's providing the help, it's providing the intervention that is necessary, and the money is being spent well. However, I add that we now need to shift our priorities to where the money is not being spent well, or where the money is not being spent enough. My colleagues have done a wonderful job at tackling what the defence money is being currently spent on and why it's not as effective as it could be. I'd like to take a slightly different approach and focus on the word prioritise in this motion. I always seem to be saying that my opposition haven't read the motion properly, and here I go again. I don't think enough focus has been put in this debate on the word prioritise. I think, obviously I would say this, but I think we have read the word prioritise and have gone with that. I'm not convinced that certain members of the proposition have. I would like to suggest some other areas that need to be prioritised alongside or before defence spending, namely the NHS, the school system and climate change. We have seen the current government's scheme to improve the school system to increase educational quality. This plans to impose a 20% VAT on school fees at private schools to make them less accessible, more accountable. They claim that an estimated £1.75 billion from this tax is going to go into public services, which includes schooling, but remains to be proved. Regardless, if you wish my further opinions on this topic, I refer you to the Secretary's notes of my floor speech last week. This is not what this debate is about. I have read the motion, I promise. My point here is that the tax is only deemed necessary because the government, past and present, has been too wound up in defence spending to be able to adequately educate our children. The House of Commons' own library, says the British government plans to spend £59.8 billion on defence in the 2025 financial year, which is an increase of £6 billion since last year, and is £5 million more than they are planning on spending on schools. And I ask you, ladies and gentlemen, this may seem equal, but does equal constitute fair and reasonable? How can it possibly be reasonable to be spending more on defence than on primary and secondary education in this country? Nearly 20% of British adults leave school with very poor literacy skills. We are not educating the children in this country to an acceptable standard. How can we call ourselves a first world country and say that we are so innovative when adults in this country aren't able to read to an acceptable standard? It's because the government clearly refuses to value education, spending adequately, instead of choosing to prioritise defence spending. This misplaced prioritisation clearly has significant detriment to society, as I hope will be obvious to you, as we can see through the appalling literacy statistics. And so I argue that the House would not prioritise defence spending. For I ask you, ladies and gentlemen, what is the point of spending so much money on defence if we are not adequately educating the children of our country? And now, on to my second point. The disparity between the spending on the NHS and defence. It must of course be noted that a considerable amount more is spent on the NHS than on defence. However, the considerable amount more is not working. It needs to become more of a priority to the government. It may seem that they are prioritising them because they're spending money, but I think if you scan your eyes over any headline at any given point in the last 5 years, you will see words such as drowning, crumbling, in crisis, patients dying in corridors, and any number of sensational headlines, you cannot seem to be under the... after reading these, you cannot be under the impression that the NHS is doing well. Clearly, something is wrong with our priorities if the most crucial system in our country, that which provides medical care, totally free at point of use, to whoever requires it, is suffering from a lack of funding and a lack of staffing because of that lack of funding, compared to the people who need it. This is relevant to our case, as we clearly see that the military is successful. Both sides have said that to you. And the attention desperately needs to be redirected to the falling NHS. Wait times are too long, there's a mental health crisis in staff, and at the point of spending so much money on defence, if we don't have a country that can heal the population, or even the soldiers who come home wounded from defending our country. Finally, I would like to draw your attention to the need for money in the climate crisis. 2024 was the warmest year on record. I'm sure you've heard all of these statistics before, but I'm going to tell you them to you again for my point. Greenland is losing billions and billions and billions of tons of ice per year, and between 2030 and 2050, climate change is due to cause, at least in some degree, 250,000 deaths a year. And if that doesn't seem like something we need to fix, I urge you to sort out your priorities, please, before you make any decisions for our country. We have all seen the news of the recent devastating wildfires in Los Angeles and the flooding in Malaysia and Haiti. Clearly there is a crisis upon us. Yet the government of this country is only committed to spending £11.6 billion between 2021 and 2026. That's the same amount in 5 years as on defence in 2.5 months. I ask you, can this possibly seem reasonable? It must be seen that there is a clear warping of priorities that needs to change in order to save the planet we call home and in order to have a country to defend at all. I firmly argue that it is vitally important that areas that are not currently being given the time, effort and consideration that money allows through the budget, because the priorities are misplaced. I will never argue against, we should completely defund the military, partly because I am slightly terrified of my naval officers, one of whom my best friend's father, and if he caught wind of me arguing against the military, I don't quite want to be on a parade ground with him ever again. I'm not saying that we should not be spending money on the military or the defence of this land. Instead, I'm saying that we need to shift our priorities from a militaristic spending and spending lots of money we famously don't have. Any politician will tell you that the other party doesn't have enough money and is spending it wrong. Quite how both of them saying this about each other tells you quite a lot about British politics at the moment, but that's a separate issue. Issues such as education, health and climate change are what we need to be focusing on. Not enough money is being set aside for these issues because the decision makers are wrapped up in militaristic ideas and they're not adequately able to solve the state. And it is to the significant detriment of our country. We should be prioritising fixing vital welfare so that we have a country that we actually want to protect and that we are actually proud of. Not in a nationalist sense, but in a sense that we believe that our politicians are doing a decent job and that the NHS will be able to cure us when we are sick. I think that's two things that we can hope to expect in a functioning society, and we need to be able to want to defend our country rather than feeling like we have to. And so I ask you, for the final time, what is the point of spending so much money defending a country that doesn't adequately serve us? Thank you.